Now we're ready to get started. So the last time I was in front of you was 12 months ago, and so I do need to bring you up to speed and stuff that's happened over the last 12 months, and then I'm going to be talking about the future. And generally speaking, it's been a great year. There have been a lot of events, some that have made history that I'm going to be describing to you, and I think it's going to be a helpful presentation. Now, as the Field Services Director, I'm in charge of basically the circle of life in the union movement. And let me describe it. This is something I go through time and time again. And let's start with our job as members in PSE is to elect supportive politicians. And then we go to them in January and we try and convince them to do the right thing for us and for education. So that's the second part. And the third part is bargaining with your districts. How many people bargain with their districts in here? Raise your hand. Yeah. Well, you know, it's a job that we depend upon a heck of a lot of volunteers to do, and I want to share with you, we've had a great year. So we've survived the Great Recession, and now we're moving forward. And there's some pretty significant signs of that improvement. So, for instance, many of you are in negotiations over the last year. Well, across the state of Washington, classified employees received a 2% salary increase across the state. Now, I know in some of your bargain units you weren't negotiating, but there were a lot of our bargain units that were. And the key I want to emphasize to this is you realize this is a 2% salary increase with no state funding. Now, how many of you have had members bring up at the meeting, what does the union do for me? Has anybody had that? Do you hear that? Well, I think the point that you need to make back to them, I just got a note. Okay. I'll get to that in a second. Well, okay. Anyway, what you need to say back to them is, this is what the union did for you. We got a 2% statewide salary increase when the state did not fund any of it. That's only about $14 million in classified employees' pockets that the state did not fund. And that $14 million doesn't stop in 1 year. It goes on forever. So keep that in mind. Unemployment is below the 2008 levels. People are back to work. Across the state, school districts have added 1,520 new classified employee positions. These are really good signs. So the 2% salary increase, what you see here is a slide. It's pretty busy, but basically it shows a listing of all the different major classifications and the salary increases they got. And obviously for us, maintenance received the largest, 2.75%, the supervisors of 3.5%, but generally everybody was in the 1.5% to 2.5% salary increases that different classifications got last year. Unemployment, as I said earlier, there's a chart there, and what it shows you is that actually we have more employees back to work than we had in 2008 before the Great Recession started. That's a good sign. So of the 1,520 new jobs that the school districts added, about 63% or 1,112 of those jobs were paraeducators. How many paraeducators in here? So that's what we've done over the last year. Those are the things that field representatives and field staff have been working hard to get employees back to work and negotiating wage increases. So I know there's a bunch of shy field representatives over there. Would you please stand up and be recognized for all your hard work? Are there any other shy field reps? Thank you, guys. So now I'm going to go on to electing supportive politicians. So PSE's involvement, we endorsed 122 candidates. We contributed $92,000. 66% of that money went to Democrats, 34% to Republicans. 86% of the money went to winning candidates. So we're spending your money wisely. So what happened in the election? Republicans took a slightly stronger position in the legislature. Before the election in the Senate, there were 24 Republicans and 2 Democrats. After the election, there were 25 Republicans and 1 Democrat. I bring this up to you because these makeups have a big impact on what you can get out of the legislature. So the House of Representatives, there was a slight reduction from 51 Democrats to from 55 to 51 Democrats, an increase of 4 for Republicans. This is a big deal for PSE, and that's why we gave $100,000 to Initiative 1351. And as you know, it did pass at 50.96%, roughly 51% passage. Now, for us, everything you heard at all the advertisements was about what? Teachers and class size reduction. What you didn't hear was, and this is what was critical to PSE, is the significant funding for classified employees, and we'll get to that a little bit later. So let me talk about how we did it. Many people have asked, what does COPE fund? Well, it funds our political contributions. So our goal for 2014-15 was 500 members donating, and next year it's 550. Well, we came into the convention at 484 members, and I thought, oh, great. I'll be able to ask people to increase that so we meet our goal for 2014-15. Well, the organizing department, Shannon, Ray, Nikki, and Sherry Osborne, just did a great job, I think, manning the COPE table, and as a result, we have 148 new or increased contributions. And from my perspective, I think it's just about everybody in this audience is a COPE contributor, just about. If you are not, please talk to somebody at your table about how important it is, and they'll be able to explain how important it is for us as an organization. So our goal is, we actually probably have around 600 members now and $31,000. So we have surpassed our goal for 2015-16. So some people may say, yeah, Doug, you lowballed the goals so you would end up looking good. No, actually, back when we set them, everybody said, geez, you know, this is going to be a push to get up to these levels. So you all are amazing, and I want to thank you for your support because we're going to put it to good use. So the next thing is we have to lobby politicians. So the close margin that you saw in the previous about Republicans and Democrats, we have split legislature. Guess what? That's why we had a 176-day session, 3 special sessions plus the regular session, because they're split. And so it took forever. Many of you are frustrated with that, right? Yeah, well, it had to work its way out, just like many of you are bargaining with school districts. Sometimes the district won't agree, and so you have to hang out until you get the right deal. Well, quite frankly, I think we have done tremendous in this session. But the legislature was facing many difficult issues. This did not seem to be a big deal, but they had $2.2 billion in new money. That's a major issue, right? Well, the problem is that they had to reinstate the Great Recession cuts and fund the long-delayed needs that had been put off for several years. So basically, everybody in Washington State was arguing, we need more money because of all these cuts. So that's quite a problem. Where do you put the $2.2 billion? Remember that number. Well, there's this other issue about we hadn't had a salary increase for 6 years. Anybody feel that? Now, we locally negotiated some salary increases. Many of you negotiated state plus 1, state plus a half, additional steps here and there. So we were getting you salary increases, but we were lacking a state-funded salary increase. And that state-funded increase applied to higher education as well as K-12. Now, K-12 health insurance is disintegrating. I was really careful in trying to figure out that word. Do I say disintegrate? Do I say collapsing? But quite frankly, we got a pretty serious problem with insurance benefits. Anybody agree with me? Yeah, it's just amazing. There hasn't been any state funding increase since 2010. And since that time, your insurance premiums have gone up. No, bear with me. Just a little bit here and there? No, a lot. So in 13-14, your premiums went up, what was that? 17%. The next year, they went up another 8%. That's the current school we're in. Next year, they're going to go up 7%. So if you add those numbers up, that's 32% premium increases. How the heck can you guys afford it? Okay, well, there's a solution. I'm going to get to it just a second. And what the premiums are increased next year is hard to say. But the trend is not good. You just look at those numbers, people. Our insurance system is just flat broke for classified employees. So we also have the Supreme Court McCleary decision. I'm not going to go through all those details, but I will say that in the September, after our convention, the Supreme Court met, and they said that the legislature was in contempt of the court. That's because the court said, do something, and the legislature didn't do it. Now, if you had kids, and many of you do, and you tell your kid to do something, and they don't do it, and it's important to you, what's the consequence? Okay, so guess what? That's the stage we're at right now, is the Supreme Court is taking testimony right now on what are the sanctions that they're going to implement because the legislature didn't do what they said. Okay? So that's the pressure on the legislature. So our goals for the session was to fund our PSE higher education contracts. We worked really hard on those contracts, and it has to, unlike your collective bargaining agreements in K-12, higher ed has to be approved by the legislature and the governor. We were looking for money for salary increase, healthcare inflation, money for higher education, early education, implement Supreme Court McCleary, and to implement Initiative 1351. All that's about $6 billion. So basically, we do what you do at the negotiating table. We give them the Christmas list and say, we want everything, and then you find out what happens in the legislative session. So we also had a priority bill, and that's for paraeducators, and that's to implement recommendations from an advisory committee, and it's robust. It is very significant for standards, training, and a career ladder for paraeducators. Those were our goals for the session. So how did we do? Well, how did we do it? We had membership involvement, so many of you have attended the legislative conference. Many of you have not. But we had 213 members there, 71 new first-timers. We had 2 higher education lobby days because we knew from the beginning of the session that one of the most difficult things we were going to try and achieve is to get our higher education contracts funded. So we were putting a lot of extra time and effort into making sure the legislators knew how important that was to us. And then our members made countless calls. And then we had an intern, Westy Erickson. Westy, are you here? Okay, good. So I'm going to give him a little bit of a hard time. I would have had his picture on this, but he's pretty shy. And I don't have a picture of him, so now you all get to see him. Stand up one more time so everybody gets to see your face, Westy. Thank you, Westy. And then I did 104 blog entries. I don't know how many of you read those goddamn things. Raise your hands if you do, because quite frankly, I have no idea. Oh, good. So, I religiously just put out all kinds of stuff. I don't know how many thousands of words I wrote over the legislative sessions, But I have had a couple people come up to me and say, Doug, I read your stuff, so I really appreciate it. And it's not like I'm going to stop. I'm going to always do it, regardless if there's just one person reading them or 100. So I'm glad that you found them helpful. I was trying to keep our members informed and what they could do during the session. If you're at all interested in it, go to the PSE website, go to this address, and you can read the 104 if you want to. So how did we do in the session? Okay, remember I told you earlier that there was $2.2 billion of new money? Actually, we ended up getting $2.3 billion. It sort of looks good to me. $1.3 billion for K-12 McCleary, $618 million for our compensation, $293 for higher education, and $134 for early education. This has never happened before. The numbers are huge, and I just want to make sure everybody pays attention to that. $741 million is MSOC, materials, supplies, and operating costs. This is a school district slush fund. School districts are going to get $370 million, and they can spend it on anything this year. Are they going to spend it on you? Well, that's not the right response. You have to be demanding. They're going to spend this money on us. If you guys are not speaking up, guess who's going to? Other people are going to speak up, so we got to speak up. So you got 741, and so you get to see the compensation. $210 million was added for pensions to stabilize our pension funds. And many of you don't even know that because it doesn't show up in the press, but it's an important element to all of us, is a stable pension system. For higher education, you got $158 million for a record-setting tuition reduction that is unprecedented in the United States, the only state in the nation to reduce tuition this year to such an extent. And for early learning, which we have a lot of ECAP members and Head Start. So, this is the one I couldn't wait to tell you about. How many of you participated in our campaign to preserve the insurance benefit factor? I have to tell you, you guys, it worked. It was something that's been in place for 31 years. 4 weeks after the legislature approved, or the House budget eliminated this program, this funding, most all of the classified employee unions knew nothing about it. PSE went to work on it immediately, and our members responded to the call. I know that because I had legislators, Senator Rivers from the 18th District, Brad Hawkins from the 12th District, call me and say, Doug, I got to meet. I'm getting so many calls. I've got more calls on this issue than any other issue this legislative session. Aberdeen chapter, Hoquiam, did a great job picketing, informational picketing on the street over the reduction in this insurance benefits. So why did the legislature try to cut $53 million from your insurance benefits? Does anybody know? I don't. Nobody would fess up to why they wanted to reduce your insurance benefits. Now, bear with me, we're already drowning from 32% premium increases, and then they want to reduce this. So I still don't have an answer, but I can tell you one thing. 50,000 classified employees out of 59,000 classified employees would have been hurt. Some of you very dramatically. $150 extra a month for insurance, just to keep the same plans. So PSE went to work, and I can tell you without any reservations that it's PSE and our members who preserve this benefit. You guys deserve... I tell you something, people who say, what the heck do my $8 million in dues that goes to PSE get me? This one issue gets you $26 million a year in additional insurance. Because if we were not successful, you would have lost that. So you should go home feeling good and bragging to everybody about what a great investment in PSE. So we had a paraeducator bill. We passed the Senate 45-3, passed the House 19-2, 28-3, and then at the very last minute, amendment was offered to kill the bill. So there's goods and bads. This one didn't work for us, but we're going to be back next year. Initiative 1351 didn't work. Sorry, Mary Howes, current regional manager, but we worked really hard to try and get it, and the best we could get was delay it for 4 years, so it's still alive, and it's important to us, and I'll show you why in just a second. But the key is, because Initiative 1351 passed, that is the reason why the legislature took so seriously funding the McCleary decision, the $1.3 billion, because they needed to do it. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit. We're working in Washington, D.C. We've got our coalition. There you get to see the partners. But I got to get to this one. They're currently negotiating the Elementary Secondary Education Act. PSE is working on one issue. We have many issues. And that's to change the name in the act from paraprofessional to paraeducator. Seems like a pretty simple thing, right? Paraeducator describes what you do better than paraprofessional. What I tell legislators is we don't professional students, we educate them. And it sort of makes sense. Well, fortunately, we're in our coalition to get our coalition behind it, but we had a little bit of problem with the American Federation of Teachers, didn't really want to change the name, so we're still working on it. And I hope to get that, and we'll have a better report next year. So we've been working on Classified Employee of the Year for years, and George deserves credit for this. He has always been saying, guys, let's quit talking, let's do something. So we finally have done something. Next year at the White House, they're going to be recognizing 10 classified employees from around the entire United States. One of those 10 is going to be the PSE Classified Employee of the Year. And that person and a spouse is going to be paid by PSE to go to the Capitol and the White House. So I think that should probably heighten the interest of all of you when we have the awards go out for next year. You'll take it a little bit more seriously because the end of that road is a trip to the White House. So, and again, I'll give George credit for it because he's the one saying, we got to do something, guys. Let's quit talking. So it happened. So we're still working on federal government and the funding for IDEA and Head Start and Title I. A lot of paraeducators are funded by these programs, so we're working on those, as well as child nutrition employees have a new requirement that they do 6 hours of training, so we were working with that one as well. So that finishes the federal lobbying. Let's go to 2016 legislative session. So you guys don't think that we achieved enough. We've gotten $2.3 billion of new money for education in the last 2 years, including the next 2. So, oh, by the way, I got to go back. See if it goes back. Oh, do you see that $130 million for school transportation? It was the very first program fully funded under the McCleary decision. So many people, many of our members, I mean, we're doing all these tremendous things for our members, getting $130 million for school transportation, and most people don't have a clue. So, you know, hopefully you take some of this information back to people about the good things that we're doing, because there's more coming. So I have to tell you, there's a big issue on compensation, and I've talked about it before, but the issue is going to be over the next 2 years. The Supreme Court is not done. The Supreme Court is saying, legislature, you guys have to deal with employee compensation and local levies. And for us, is a couple $100 million at stake. So hopefully that catches your ear, because this is what we currently are operating off of, a busy chart. I'm just going to say currently we received, just for an example, 31,000. School districts are contributing an additional 1,200. So total is 32,896, just looking at the teaching assistants. Now, there's different categories. There's the maintenance, there's the IT. Well, the new state-funded amount would be $45,386. Does anybody see an increase there from 32,000 to 45,000? That's a lot of money at stake here. Okay? So you see all the way down to maintenance and all the different categories. But what you have to realize is this is $277 to $324 million that they're talking about. Now, this is not just a pie in the sky. There were 5 bills introduced this legislative session to do this. 5 bills. None of them passed because they haven't gotten the will yet to do it. I think the Supreme Court's going to give them the will within the next month or two when they sanction them or tell them, you do this or else. So you have to realize that actually there's been a lot of work already been done. So this is not far-fetched. It's very likely something's going to happen, and it's going to result in a fairly significant increase to compensation for classified employees. Is that sort of good news? Yeah, I think so too. That's why we're working so hard on it. But the problem is, and this is something I'm also working on, is that legislators say we're not going to write a blank check. If we're going to pay this $300 million additional for your salaries, we want to make sure that we're not just next year going to have to write another $300 million. And then the next year after that, another $300 million. So there is some conversation that I'm dealing with, is trying to head off their efforts to limit what we can negotiate at the table in the next, if they fund that $300 to $400 million. So it's just work that I'm doing, and I think we're going to be successful, but it's still out there. So we have this other issue, and the fact that a lot of our members are funded by the local levies rather than the state, and the Supreme Court says you can't do that. So Initiative 1351 had a formula, and it cost $680 million to adequately fund classified employee services. Okay? That's what we're working on. Currently, the state only funds $788 million, so that's basically an 86% increase in staffing for classified employees. That's what we're working on. So it's potential 21,000 new classified employees. And this is the breakdown where the money would go, the $680 million. All of this was in Initiative 1351. All of this is why we supported 1351 so strongly. So that's the upper limit. We'd like to get $680 million, but actually probably something that's more likely is this $200 million figure. I think the Supreme Court's going to say you can't rely upon local levies to fund basic education classified employees, and that cost is $197 million. So the spread that I'm working on is anywhere from $200 million additional for staffing for classified employees up to $680 million. So hopefully you guys are adding all these little pieces together, because that's the 2016 session. So $280 million for salaries, $200 million for funding. Are we doing a good thing? Good, good. I know I'm probably overwhelming you with too much data, so I'll rush through it. So we have this other issue on insurance. So in 2012, we passed a bill. Legislature said you got to have 3 to 1. That's a single employee pays $1, a family should only pay $3. That's the ratio, 3 to 1. Unfortunately, they gave us 3 years to fix the system, and we just had a report. We're at 10 to 1 after 2 years. The legislature is not happy. So consolidation of K-12, I think, is going to be a very significant issue in the next legislative session. Very serious. And let me explain why. If you're in PEB, like our higher education members, Nearly 61% of them are on the uniform medical plan. Their premiums have gone up 4% in 3 years. Everybody hear that? There are 129,000 state employees and higher education employees. 61%, 80,000, are on the UMP, and they've only had a 4% increase in 3 years. So let's look at WA Primera, which 61% of K-12 employees are on. Your premiums have gone up 32%, 7% this year. Guys, you all are suffering in silence. And by the time I finish, I hope you're going to stop it. Because it's not healthy for you. So we're working on the paraeducator bill next year. This time it's going to affect all 25,000 paraeducators. Our goal is not only to get better training, but also set in place an opportunity for paraeducators to gain more experience, gain more abilities in the classroom, gain better recognition, so guess what? They get higher pay. So it's a chicken and egg thing. In this one, I can tell you, chicken and egg, we got to go out and get the training. We have to have the new standards, because then when we go back to the negotiating table, we can say, hey, we deserve more pay. And I tell you what, school districts have testified against this bill because they say if they get better standards, if they're recognized, we're going to have to pay them more. So I can't think of a better way to affect 42% of our members than to work through this bill. So this is going to be another high priority for us. So I'm swinging back to the final piece here, which is I'm going back. This is the circle of life, because now we're bargaining with school districts. We have 75 open contracts right now. This is your opportunity, people. We have 81 salary negotiations and 51 insurance negotiations going on as we speak. So, what can you do? Obviously, you can participate. During the legislative session, read the blog and participate in our advocacy efforts. Contribute to COPE is key, because politics does not run without money. Your car does not run without gas. Politics does not run for PSE without money. So your COPE contributions have a tremendous effect. Negotiate, negotiate, negotiate. People, you cannot for 1 minute accept the school district's argument that they don't have any money. Not for 1 minute. The $2.3 billion that school districts are getting is free money. They can spend it on anything they want. And for an employer to tell you, in the richest times, in the best times, that there's no money, what's it going to be like when we don't have $2 billion and we only have $500 million? You're never going to get it. So I'm sorry, but you can't sit around. This is the time to be demanding of school districts and not accept no. And if you don't accept no, don't accept the first one. Make them prove it. So this one is a little incendiary, so I apologize, but many of you who are older maybe saw the movie Network. Anybody see that? Where the broadcaster, he was just so frustrated, and he just said, he finally gave up. He'd been suffering in silence, and he finally said, I'm mad as hell, and I can't take it any longer. I am amazed at classified employees. You guys are getting run over. Your paychecks go to the insurance companies. It doesn't buy food. 2 days ago, I wish I remembered his name. Maintenance guy, he said, you know, Doug, I started in 2008. I've had 2 upgrades, maintenance employee, full-time employee, and 2 upgrades, and I make less now than I made 8 years ago because insurance ate everything up. How many of you have had that experience? Stand up, please. Because I'll tell you something, the legislature needs to hear this, and your school districts do. You got to stop just suffering in silence. You got to be demanding. That's one thing I love about classified employees and representing you all these 32, nearly 33 years, is because you're very forgiving. You're forgiving to a fault, and you've got to stop it. You are getting killed by insurance. You're spending all your time negotiating salary increases, and then every penny you negotiate goes where? We got to be as demanding on the insurance side as on the salary side. So, as field services director, I can be a little bit more demanding there. I can say, negotiations, get out there and do it. I'm just about done. Am I 30 minutes? So, we have fair contract campaign assistance all ready to go. Many of you are frightened by advocacy and by hitting the streets and informational picketing and doing strong tactics to advocate for yourself. I know you all. You're afraid to do it. But I tell you something, if you don't do it this year, you're never going to get it. So good luck, and we're ready to help you. Thank you.